Hello guys, in this video, we will be discussing the importance of car props in video games. I will be specifically discussing the props from source games such as Team Fortress 2, Counter-Strike, Half-Life 2, and etc. So without further ado, let's get right into it. I feel like a lot of the time, people tend to underestimate the importance of car props in video games, as they are essential in enhancing the environment of maps depending on the context of each map. To elaborate on what I just said, I will use Half-Life 2 as an example right now to explain my point. As we all know, it is heavily implied that City 17 in Half-Life 2 is set in Eastern Europe, mainly due to the incorporation of Eastern European style architecture, as well as texts printed on signs and posters referencing Slavic and Baltic countries. It is uncertain as to what country City 17 is exactly set in, but I do have a few theories. Moving on to the main subject of this video, that being automobiles. The car props scattered around the game happen to be vehicles that were highly popular in Eastern European countries, like the Russian-built Moskvich 2140 you see from time to time, as well as the completely totaled German-built VW Golf, which was sold globally, but was and still is a common sight in Eastern European countries. Every single vehicle prop in this game contextually makes sense, as every single one of these vehicles would have been present in these regions in the continent of Europe. Of course, the Dodge Charger you drive in Half-Life 2 Episode 2 was never directly sold anywhere outside of the Americas, but even then, ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, American imported vehicles became very popular and still are to this day in countries that were occupied by the said Soviet Union. So I see absolutely nothing weird with this vehicle being featured in the game. If anything, it makes the Half-Life universe more authentic, I think. I see all of these silly Redditors complaining about the inclusion of this vehicle in the game, but they clearly don't know what they're talking about. Like seriously, I come from the Baltic states, and I see these huge parking lots full of freshly imported Dodge Rams, Ford F-150s, and Toyota Tundras, which are, believe it or not, manufactured in Texas. I literally see more Buick Encores on the street than I do see the domestically sold Opel Mokkas. I see an American imported vehicle wherever I go. The Dodge Durango seems to be especially popular. Moving away from my rant, there is one other thing that Valve did so excellently well with the car props. Referring to when the resonance cascade occurred in the original Half-Life, that being 1998, majority of the cars driven around Eastern Europe would have been old, beat-up cars like the ones you see in the game, since the 1990s was still a rough period financially for Slavic, Baltic, and Balkan countries alike. After the resonance cascade, I assume new vehicles for the civilians would not have been manufactured, and Half-Life 2 is apparently set in either the 2010s or the 2020s, so essentially, the remaining civilians are stuck back in time when it comes to the selection of vehicles they can drive, if they even do drive. This is what I deeply appreciate Valve for with Half-Life 2. They got the context so right with the automobiles you see in the game. With the beta version of Half-Life 2, on the other hand, it is presumed to be set in the USA, and that's where it gets very inconsistent when it comes to the car props. The development team went from adding an American-built Chevy Caprice, which was a solid choice for a US setting, but then they implemented a Unimog 406, which was never domestically sold, ever. Of course, you could say it could have been an import, but even then, it is such an odd and specific choice, as you rarely ever see a truck built for EU regulations in the US. There's many other vehicle models which don't make sense for the North American setting, but maybe Gordon Freeman was meant to travel internationally throughout the game. Who knows? Moving on to the original Half-Life, along with its spin-offs Blue Shift and Opposing Force, these games also possess vehicle props which fit ideally within the game, as the Black Mesa Research Facility is based in the US in the state of New Mexico to be exact. The Black Mesa security SUV is seemingly based off of the 1990 Nissan Pathfinder, despite it clearly being based off of the Jeep Cherokee in the fan-made remake Black Mesa. These two SUVs still ideally fit the environment given the context of the location these games are set in. You can also make out that the AM General M35 is being used as a logistics vehicle by the US Army, which also works perfectly. Overall, there weren't that many vehicle props in the original Half-Life, so there wasn't much to go wrong with. Traveling to a universe where the graphics are a lot more cartoony, Team Fortress 2 has done an alright job when it comes to the automobile props. I have made a video before about the origins of the vehicle props in Team Fortress 2, and it's worth checking out since I discuss how a lot of the models fit the context of the maps they're featured in. A few things bother me, however. One of the things being that they used a French-built Peugeot 203 and CP Dustball which is set to be in the US. The Peugeot 203 was never sold in the US, so my guess is that this ambulance is a grey import. Sniper's Land Rover was also not formally sold in the USA back in the 1970s when the game is supposedly set, yet you still see him cruising around in it and meet the Sniper on presumably American soil. Not all is wrong, however, as for instance, the map Koth King is in possession of the Leyland Olympian, which beautifully complements the Hong Kong-inspired environment, as the Leyland Olympian was indeed being used to shuttle citizens around the area back then. One problem I do have, however, is that generation of the Leyland Olympian started production in the 1980s, when the TF2 universe, as you all know, is set in the 1970s. Oh well. I could go on and on about the inconsistencies, but I will give it to Valve for playing it safe, by making mostly USDM automobiles for the maps such as the Chevy 1.5-ton pickup truck as well as the Diamond T536, since I assume most of the maps in the game are set in the US. My overall verdict with Team Fortress 2 is that I guess Valve didn't worry that much about the vehicles fitting the context, and they only made those specific vehicle props for the sake of having cool looking vehicle props, I suppose. Moving on to a game which likes to share props a lot with Left 4 Dead, Counter-Strike Global Offensive is an interesting one. Whilst a lot of the time they get the context right with the automobile props, there are a few instances where in maps such as DE Nuke, they made some interesting decisions in regards to the vehicles used. DE Nuke was supposedly supposed to be set in Germany, but eventually it was relocated to the United States. But the fact that they used the Gas Gazelle 3302 in the map is a peculiar choice. If the map is set in Germany, sure, you could drive the truck over from Russia to Germany or wherever else they sell that truck. But knowing that the map finally was settled to be in the USA, it just doesn't make sense. This rig is one hell of a grey import in this case. Why didn't they just settle for something like a 40 Econoline? Or just use the GMC W400 5000 model Valve had at their disposal? This I will never understand. Speaking of Left 4 Dead, as mentioned when I was talking about CSGO, Valve did a pretty refined job with the vehicle props, however I wish there were more. The vehicles in Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 all appear to be USDM. However, for a game set in the late 2000s, there are barely any modern vehicles scattered around the levels from that time. The most modern vehicles I found in the game are the 2002 Dodge Rams and early 2000s Ford Crown Victorias plastered around the said levels. Majority of the vehicles are from the 1980s, which weren't that uncommon at the time, I guess. There is one problem, however. A big one. The final campaign for Left 4 Dead 2, The Last Stand, features Soviet-Russian vehicles all around the levels. They're all imports, I guess. I don't care anymore. I mean, fair enough. For foreign cars to be imported legally, they have to be over 25 years old. So I guess someone in the Left 4 Dead universe must have been a Soviet car enthusiast. But then again, apparently the Last Stand campaign isn't canon to the Left 4 Dead universe, so I'll somewhat let it slide. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. Please do feel free to subscribe and stay tuned for more content in the future. Bye bye.